Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting.
This time we're tackling a potential peace plan for the conflict in Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
And get this,
Okay.
the framework comes from ChatGPT.
You're kidding?
No, I'm serious.
Wow.
Artificial intelligence proposing solutions to one of the most complex situations in the world right now.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, so we've got this 23-point plan that ChatGPT put together.
Okay.
So it's really a roadmap to analyze.
Right.
And there are some twists and turns that we need to unpack.
Definitely.
Things like special status for certain regions in Ukraine, the question of Crimea,
Yeah.
even a pause on Ukraine joining NATO.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting deep dive, I think.
I'm fascinated already.
So let's just start with the foundation of any peace plan,
Sure.
which is a ceasefire.
Right.
ChatGPT proposes establishing a demilitarized zone,
Okay.
essentially a buffer zone
I see.
to prevent accidental clashes. It
Yeah.
seems straightforward. But in practice, how would this even work?
Well, I think the success of that really hinges on the monitoring and the enforcement.
Okay.
We're talking about shattered trust here on both sides.
Yeah.
So verifying troop movements.
Right.
Making sure that both sides comply.
Yeah.
It would just be such a massive undertaking.
It's a huge area.
Huge area. And, just think about the logistics.
Yeah.
The potential for misunderstandings. It would
Right.
be a delicate operation for sure.
And, we can't forget about all the people who are caught in the middle of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine you're just a civilian living in one of these contested areas.
Right.
Okay, the ceasefire brings, a moment of peace.
Right.
But still, the tension, the uncertainty,
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to weigh heavy on you.
The human cost is immense.
Absolutely.
But moving on, we get to, I think, the heart of the issue.
Oh, okay.
Sovereignty and territorial integrity.
All right.
This plan
Okay.
proposes recognizing Ukraine's 1991 borders,
Okay.
which includes Crimea.
Now, hold on. Russia annexed Crimea back in 2014.
Yeah.
Is this AI suggesting that Russia just hands it back?
Well,
I mean, how could they even sell that to their people?
that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah,
Crimea is a massive sticking point.
for sure.
I mean, it's strategically important.
Right.
It holds deep historical and cultural significance for Russia. And let's not forget the people that live there.
Yeah,
I mean, their lives have been completely upended.
yeah.
So this isn't just about, drawing lines on a map. We're talking about real lives,
Yeah.
deeply held beliefs.
Okay, so Crimea is clearly a hurdle.
Yeah.
But what about Donetsk and Luhansk?
Okay.
These have been hotbeds of conflict for years.
They have.
What does ChatGPT have to say about those?
So the plan proposes something called a special administrative status
Special administrative staff.
for these regions.
Okay.
It would give them a significant degree of autonomy over their local governance. It even suggests a potential future referendum on their status.
Okay.
So think of it like a mini-election
Okay.
where the people in those regions get to decide their own fate.
So it sounds like this acknowledges the pro-Russian sentiment in those areas.
Yeah, it does.
But wouldn't that risk further dividing Ukraine?
Well, it's a gamble.
It is.
No question.
Yeah.
And it raises a lot of complex questions.
Like what?
Well, for instance, what does autonomy actually mean?
Right.
In practice, how much control would these regions have
Yeah.
over their own affairs?
Right.
Could this be a stepping stone to something more
Yeah.
like full independence?
Right.
Or is it genuinely about local control within a unified Ukraine?
Yeah.
It's a tightrope walk,
It is.
for sure.
And while we're on the topic of potential divisions,
Yeah.
the plan also includes protections for the Russian language and culture
Right.
throughout all of Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
And that's been a point of contention for a long time.
It has.
How might this play out?
Well, it's an attempt to address the concerns of Russian-speaking Ukrainians
Okay.
who feel that their cultural identity is threatened.
Right.
But, it also raises concerns about potential separatism. And it could be seen as legitimizing Russia's claims of protecting Russian speakers abroad.
Right.
So again,
Yeah.
it's a delicate balancing act,
Yes.
trying to protect minority rights while preserving the national unity.
We've talked about Donetsk and Luhansk getting this special status.
Right?
But what about Crimea?
Yeah.
Does ChatGPT have a solution for this?
Well, the plan suggests a 5-year timeline
5 years.
to determine the status of Crimea
Okay.
through international negotiation.
Mm.
So essentially, it's kicking the can down the road,
Oh, wow.
hoping that in 5 years' time, the situation will be more conducive
Right.
to a peaceful resolution.
You know, they say time heals all wounds,
Yeah?
but 5 years.
That's a long time.
That's a long time to live with this uncertainty hanging over your head. Is this delay tactic really a solution?
Right.
Or is it just postponing a bigger problem down the road?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of whether this plan is designed for a quick fix
Hmm.
or a lasting peace.
Right.
Delaying the decision on Crimea might be necessary to get both sides to the table initially.
Okay.
But you have to wonder if it just sets us up for a bigger showdown later on.
Crimea is like a ticking time bomb in this whole plan, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's got all these layers,
It's
just
got-
historical claims, strategic importance,
Yeah.
and then there are all the people that call Crimea home.
Absolutely.
I mean, how are they supposed to feel with their future up in the air like this?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
This isn't just about land and power.
Right.
This is about people's lives.
Absolutely.
And that's something we have to remember as we unpack the rest of this plan.
Okay, so we've talked about these immediate hurdles,
Yeah.
the ceasefire, the territorial disputes,
Right.
but what about the long game?
Okay. What does this plan propose for rebuilding and reconciliation
Right.
after all this conflict is over?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, let's get into that.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate crisis.
Right.
But the long-term vision,
Yeah.
that's where things get really thought-provoking.
Okay.
So ChatGPT lays out some pretty ambitious goals.
Oh, like what?
Things like rebuilding infrastructure,
Okay.
jump-starting economic cooperation,
Wow.
even tackling things like energy security.
Those are huge.
These are all massive undertakings.
Yeah.
But what really struck me
Yeah.
was the emphasis on the human element.
So not just like bricks and mortar, but actually like healing the scars left by the conflict.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
The plan calls for programs to support displaced persons,
Right.
to provide psychological support,
Mm.
and to foster reconciliation between communities.
Yeah.
So it's acknowledging that true peace
Yeah.
goes beyond just stopping the fighting.
Right. It's about rebuilding lives
Yeah.
and mending the social fabric.
Okay, so I'm picturing this, towns and cities in ruins,
Yeah.
families scattered, a
Right.
deep-seated resentment just simmering below the surface.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom where you even begin to address all that.
It's a monumental task.
Yeah.
And the plan really hinges on sustained international support.
Right.
I mean, rebuilding requires massive funding expertise,
Yeah.
a commitment that goes beyond just writing checks.
Right.
And let's be honest,
Yeah.
the track record of the international community in these situations,
Yeah.
well, let's just say it's not always stellar.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
Promises are easily made, but follow through is
Exactly.
a whole other thing.
Right.
So let's assume for a second that the international community steps up,
Okay.
provides the necessary support.
Right.
What are some of the specific challenges
Well,
that you see?
first you have to address the immediate needs.
Okay.
Housing, food,
Right.
medical care
Right.
for those who've been displaced.
Of course.
Then you've got this monumental task of rebuilding the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Roads, bridges, hospitals, schools.
That's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
But beyond the physical reconstruction,
Yeah.
you have to tackle the invisible scars.
Things like trauma and grief and distrust.
Exactly.
Those are wounds that don't just heal overnight.
They don't.
No.
And fostering reconciliation
Yeah.
in a society that's been ripped apart by conflict
Yeah.
is no easy feat.
For sure.
It requires addressing past grievances,
Right.
building bridges between communities,
Yeah.
creating spaces for dialogue and healing.
Right.
It's a long and delicate process.
We've been really deep in the weeds here of the plan itself.
We have.
But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Talk about the bigger picture.
Right.
This conflict isn't happening in a vacuum.
No, it's not.
What are the geopolitical implications of this peace plan?
Right.
Especially for, this delicate balance of power in the region.
Well, one of the most significant proposals is a 10-year moratorium on Ukraine joining NATO.
10 years.
Now, this is a huge concession,
Yeah.
especially considering the security concerns that drove Ukraine
All right.
to seek closer ties with the West in the first place.
This feels like a direct attempt to adjust Russia's concerns
It does.
about NATO expansion.
Yeah.
But is a temporary pause enough to satisfy them?
That's a good question.
And what message does it send to other countries in the region
Right.
who might be thinking about aligning themselves with the West?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
On the one hand, this moratorium could be seen as a way to de-escalate tensions
Okay.
and create space for dialogue.
Right.
But on the other hand, it could be interpreted as appeasement,
Right.
and embolden Russia to make further demands.
And what about Ukraine's right to self-determination? Is it
Yeah.
fair to ask them to compromise their security aspirations for the
Right.
sake of peace?
Yeah, you've hit on a fundamental tension
Yeah.
at the heart of this conflict.
Yeah.
How do you balance the security concerns of one country
Yay.
with the sovereign rights of another?
Yeah.
There's no easy answers here.
No. All right. So we have this ambitious plan,
Yeah,
but as we've seen a lot of serious challenges to overcome,
definitely.
how does ChatGPT propose to actually enforce all this?
Right.
What guarantees are there
Yeah.
that both sides will actually stick to the agreement?
Well, the plan mentions the usual suspects,
Okay.
UN peacekeepers to monitor the ceasefire,
Okay.
investigations into war crimes
All right.
to ensure accountability.
Uh-huh.
But as we know, these mechanisms are often fraught with difficulties.
History's littered with examples of peacekeeping missions
Yeah.
that struggled to maintain order,
Right.
war crimes tribunals that faced all sorts of political roadblocks.
They do.
It makes you wonder, are these just symbolic gestures?
Right.
Or do they have real teeth?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
You need buy-in from all sides,
Uh-huh.
not just lip service. There needs to be a genuine commitment
Yeah.
to uphold the agreement.
Yeah.
And that requires transparency, accountability,
Right.
and a willingness to address past wrongs.
It's not enough to just sign a piece of paper and hope for the best.
Exactly.
You need mechanisms to ensure compliance,
Yeah.
address violations, and build trust over time.
Right.
This feels like the most fragile part of this whole plan.
It is.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the limitations of any peace plan.
Okay.
It can provide a framework, a
Yeah.
roadmap for moving forward.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the success of any peace agreement hinges on the will
Yeah.
of the parties involved.
We've explored the intricacies of this AI-generated peace plan.
We have.
From the ceasefire to the long-term vision for rebuilding and reconciliation. We've also grappled with some really tough questions about, the geopolitical implications and the mechanisms for enforcement.
Yeah.
But there's one big question looming over all of this.
What is that?
Would this plan, even if it was flawlessly executed, actually bring lasting peace to Ukraine?
I mean, that's the question that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a simple answer.
Right.
On paper, it looks good.
Yeah.
This plan addresses a lot of the key issues
Right.
that are driving this conflict.
Yeah.
It tries to balance Ukraine's sovereignty with Russia's security concerns.
Right.
It proposes ways to address past grievances
Yeah.
and rebuild trust.
Yeah.
It outlines a path for economic recovery and reconciliation.
It sounds pretty good.
It does.
But as we've been talking about,
Yeah.
there are just so many potential pitfalls along the way.
Oh, yeah.
And it requires a level of international cooperation and goodwill
Yeah.
that we haven't really seen much of lately.
Yeah. It really hinges on that.
Yeah, definitely.
And, even if we assume the best case scenario here,
Okay.
like all parties agree to the plan,
Uh-huh.
the ceasefire holds, the international community delivers on all its promises.
Right.
There's still a deeper question we need to consider.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What is that deeper question?
What does true healing and reconciliation actually look like in a society that's been so deeply fractured by war?
Right.
I mean, we can talk about rebuilding infrastructure and economies,
Yeah.
but what about the psychological wounds,
Yeah.
the trauma, the resentment that lingers long after the fighting stops?
Yeah. It's like we're trying to solve a complex equation with only half the variables.
Yeah, it is.
We can address all the political and territorial disputes,
Right.
but how do you quantify the pain and suffering, the
Yeah.
loss of loved ones, the shattered sense of security?
And those are the things that can fester
Yeah.
and erupt if they're not addressed.
Yeah.
True peace, lasting peace,
Yeah.
requires more than just a cessation of hostilities. Requires a change in attitudes and perceptions, a willingness to acknowledge past wrongs,
Yeah.
a commitment to building a shared future.
So this plan, this AI-generated roadmap,
Yeah.
it's really just the first step in
Yeah.
a much longer and more complex journey.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It gives us a starting point,
Okay.
a framework for dialogue and negotiation.
Right.
But the real work,
Yeah.
the hard work of building peace,
Yeah.
that happens in the hearts and minds
Right.
of the people affected by this conflict.
And that's something that no algorithm, no matter how sophisticated,
No,
can predict or control.
that's a good point.
It's a reminder that peace is ultimately a human endeavor.
It is.
And it requires empathy, understanding,
Absolutely.
and a willingness to forgive.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, first, I hope they gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity of this conflict.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines,
Right.
the political rhetoric, but the reality on the ground is much more nuanced.
Yeah. Yeah. We peeled back some of those layers today.
We did.
And there are no easy answers. There are no quick fixes.
Definitely not.
Second, I hope this deep dive has sparked some critical thinking about the role of technology in conflict resolution. AI can be a really powerful tool.
They can.
For analyzing things, generating potential solutions.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember that technology is only as good as the humans who are using it.
Right.
It's a tool, not a magic bullet.
Exactly.
And ultimately, it's up to us as humans to decide how we use these tools to build a more peaceful and just world.
Couldn't agree more.
And finally, I hope this conversation has left our listeners with a sense of hope.
Yeah.
However fragile it may seem, peace is possible.
It is.
Even in the most challenging of circumstances.
I believe that.
But it requires a collective effort.
Yeah.
A willingness to engage in difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
And a commitment to seeking solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Beautifully put.
And on that note, I think we'll leave it there for today.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of the Ukraine conflict and the potential for peace.
Appreciate it.
And we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, stay informed, and engage in these meaningful conversations about how we can build a better future.
Great advice.
For everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.